Well, the first video in this series did incredibly well. You really offered some fantastic feedback, some of which I'll address in this video actually. This is the second installment in this series wherein I'm going to drop 20 pounds or 9 kilograms and explain my way through it. It's only a little more than a week later, so there's no physique updates, but I have dropped around 2 pounds, almost 1 kilo in that time. Now, before I get to some of your comments and questions, let me address something about that weight loss. I believe it was Mary that actually asked if all the weight that I'm going to be losing will come from fat. And the answer is certainly no. Initial weight loss is mostly water, not fat. The reason is because the muscles initially catabolize stored sugar known as glycogen, and the liver does the same. So since glycogen is stored at a ratio of 1 part glycogen and 3 parts water, losing substantial water weight in the first week. Now, after that, weight loss will slow, but the weight loss that does occur will be mostly fat. Now, how can I know that? I can't. But the science is clear that training your muscles while losing fat massively protects muscle mass, skewing weight loss to be dominated by fat. This feeds well into the second question that I saw related to my protein intake, which was brought up by Rose van der Rijden. Have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Please correct me, phonetically speaking, if you can, Rose. Rose mentioned that my protein intake seemed really high, and then mentioned Dr. Walter Longo's protocol that aims to keep protein low. I've covered several of Dr. Longo's studies on health, from his fasting mimicking diet, the low protein intake, and so on. And while I agree that if a person wants to achieve certain health benefits, a lower protein intake is desirable. The aim for me is not necessarily to achieve peak health, but strike a balance between health and performance. I've been exercising my entire life, including 13 years of lifting behind me. And the only way for me to maintain my strength and muscle mass is to consume a sizable amount of protein to accommodate recovery from my training while I'm in an energy deficit. Believe it or not, 210 grams of protein is still quite conservative. Another advantage of high protein is the satiety factor, which will be a massive issue deeper into my fat loss phase. I can speak from experience many times over, but I'll speak to it in detail once we get to that point. And no, I will not be in a 500 calorie deficit throughout the next few months. I'm starting there, and then I will need to make adjustments. All great points, Rose. Thanks for chiming in, and hope your fencing is going well. Seems you have a rich family history of it. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge anyone else that commented that they were joining in the journey with me. It may not and does not need to be 20 pounds. It can be more or it can be less, depending on what you feel for yourself. And huge shout out to Jack on the significant weight loss over the last 2 years, and Kent, who cut alcohol. Supernova, Martin, Andrew, Elmac, Joe, and everyone else that decided to also join in their respective terms. Now, let me show you a few of the meals that I eat while I still am consuming my 500 calorie deficit of 3,100 calories a day. Afterward, we'll continue with more specific questions that you guys had. I briefly mentioned that while I'm still able to eat a sizable amount of food, I'm still including breakfast, then skipping lunch and having dinner. I skip lunch only because I'm too busy in the lab to eat, and eating 210 grams of protein a day is a pain when I'm only eating dinner. So I'll usually consume a huge chunk of protein in the morning after my training, if I train that day. So that's whole milk Greek yogurt with honey. Love me some high fructose. And then I'll have some eggs that I lightly season based off of some lessons that I picked up from my mother. Salt and paprika. And I'll slam a casein protein shake. So that cuts my protein in half for the day, keeping my carbs and fats low to enjoy those later in the day. So in the evening, I'll eat chicken, a protein, pasta, and some form of vegetables. I add a bit of pasta sauce, which is about 100 calorie expense. I use an air fryer, so no, I don't have to use oils that add unnecessary calories. At this point, I'm hovering around 200 grams of protein, and I can breathe easier since I'll have a good amount of calories left over, yet that I can indulge in less nutritious foods like ice cream. Did he just say ice cream? Isn't sugar the most fattening substance of all time? The insulin spike leads to immediate obesity. If you've been around for a while, you know that that's a load of bull. But there is one last thing to say on all this. So everything is weighed to the gram. I allow myself about a 5 gram plus or minus, but everything is weighed. Even the pasta sauce, the milk, all of it. Then I put all of that information into my handy dandy MyFitnessPal app that I can easily scan what I've eaten, and in a matter of, a minute, I have everything laid out and tracked. This is absolutely critical. If I don't do that, I'm just shooting in the dark. Without data, no adjustments can be made when I have future problems, which I predict that I will. If you have any questions on all that, post it and I'll cover it in the next video. Now, Razichen ASMR, please correct me. Just like write it out, the phonetic spelling, how I'm supposed to pronounce that for the future. Hopefully I'll get it right the next time. Ask some really wonderful questions on what describes health. Is it losing fat, gaining muscle, internal health? And the answer is most definitely all of them. Not being over fat is a huge one, and what might be huger is having some lean mass on you, not to the degree of a bodybuilder, but being lean and somewhat muscular lends itself to greater insulin sensitivity, mechanical functionality, your ability to move, and really it reduces the risk of all diseases. However, that still doesn't offer a great description of health unless we consider, as you put it, internal health, wherein we need a host of biochemical tests. The ones that are available to use are the ones like cholesterol, triglycerides, C-reactive protein, ALT, AST, and many others. The less readily available ones would be like the ones of particular molecules within our cells, like AKT, AMPK, mTOR, PGC1 alpha, and many others. I don't think that the last tier is necessary. Getting blood work done for your first set is enough. But in terms of the role in insulin, you can run tests on yourself to know if you are insulin sensitive or not, which I can describe in the future in more detail. But it does take a lot of work, time, and money. So to do all those kinds of tests on yourself. So something I wish that would be cheaper, because I'd like to do them more regularly myself. And speaking to that, the ever-present and appreciated Math Faster, hi Math Faster, mentioned I should maybe get some blood work done to see how this will all affect my health. It's actually a great idea. That was actually echoed by a few others, and I wish I'd had the time and money to do one before I actually started all this, but I may try to do it at the end regardless. I check my own blood work every year, so that I may as well do it again this year. Now, M asked if this whole deal with my dropping fat is a yearly thing, and yes, it is. I typically spend about 8 to 12 months building muscle in my deficient areas, and during that time, I gain weight to fulfill my energy needs for muscle growth. As a consequence, I gain fat over that period, and I like to remove it before I go through another growth phase. You mentioned you do something similar in Sweden. Well, I tend to try to aim to also gain weight in winter when it's cold and dark. We kind of sound like bears. I'll go ahead and say that this will not be an indefinite thing. Once I've reached my physique goals in terms of muscle growth, I'll stick to that weight that I'm comfortable with and maintain year round. I'll show you guys how to do that too in time. Now, I wanted to answer a question offered by VR, who has also had a wonderful weight loss journey that I'm sure was grueling, but you persevered. So congratulations on achieving with all your hard work. And VR was asking about a 3-day fasting protocol. They wanted to know what steps to take to maintain as much muscle as possible. Well, you aren't going to like my answer, but the answer is nothing. I could try to sell you on the idea of consuming some essential amino acid or something along those lines, but that defeats the idea of the fast. If you're amenable to that idea of doing a quasi-fast, essential amino acids are your best bet. Not to be confused with branched chain amino acids. Forget those. Ultimately, any consumption beyond water and non-caloric micronutrients, like electrolytes, etc., are going to negate some of the health benefits of the fast. However, if you're okay with just a majority of the benefits while still losing substantial weight, I'd lean a bit into protein for possibly some essential amino acids to sip on, or just get essential amino acids. That said, I don't think you'll lose any substantial muscle mass from a 3-day fast, so I wouldn't worry over it too much. But beware, if you consume anything caloric, you will reduce your HGH effect that you mentioned in your comment. I wish I had a magic potion, but I don't, nor does anyone else, so don't buy anything special. Hope it helps in my limited way. Finally, Zara Lily Ann asked a few questions for the ladies. Part of the question on hormones I'll need to leave for next time because it'll fit better. But the first part of the question was determining the ideal calorie deficit from maintenance. Someone else mentioned that they get overly hungry consuming a 500 calorie deficit, and 300 calories works better for them. And I think this is a critical consideration. I think it's a good idea to go more conservative if you're working with a smaller number. It may take longer, but it'll pay off in better sustainability. Women can certainly aim for 1 pound of weight loss a week, but it will depend from person to person because eventually the hunger becomes a real issue. So you can go hard, aggressive at the start, then ease up strategically at other moments. I'll probably end up discussing how to do that in the future because I may need to use some of those techniques myself. To answer your question more succinctly, I don't use percentages. I go with absolute numbers. So I'd say a 300 calorie deficit is the lowest I'd go because the delta between your maintenance and your deficit is too small at 100 or 200, which leads to less room for error if you miscalculate one day by 200 or 300 calories. It certainly happened to me on several occasions. Now, aiming for half a pound of weight loss works, likely not much less than that, however. All right, folks, I hope I was able to provide some value, even if I didn't get to everyone. And hopefully in a number of weeks, I'll update you again. And feel free to post more questions for next time. Thanks for hanging out with me, and till next time.